Good evening. Big welcome to you all. Welcome. It's John here from Tutor to You, welcoming you along to another one of our revision blasts. Now, if you're sat there wondering why we're doing a macro revision blast tonight, when I've got my micro paper coming up in a couple of days' time, we're making sure that we get a couple of macros in before your macro exam, which is obviously not very far away as well. Jeff, of course, is back tomorrow night to do a few more micro topics if you're still looking at getting some micro revision. So here we are. If you've not done one of these before, we've got 30 minutes or so of fast-paced, quick activities, checking your understanding and knowledge and ability to put some thoughts together for macroeconomics topics. I'm joined tonight by Lisa on the right-hand side of the screen and Isabel in the middle. Good evening, both.
Hello. Hello.
Good to see you both. Just a quick reminder to everybody that the PowerPoint that we're about to use will be available for you to download pretty much as soon as this live stream has finished. We would love to see your responses in the chat window if you're watching this live, and obviously if you're on replay, take as much time as you would like. I think we might be ready though. Should we get cracking, guys?
Definitely. Sure thing.
Brilliant stuff. Here we go.
Okay, so starting off with some multiple choice questions. Now, there is a calculation question towards the end, so you might need to grab a paper and some paper and a pencil. Okay, so first question. Major factor influencing the level of consumer spending. Now, big word here is major. Okay, look really carefully at that word. That's a weasel word. It's a discriminator word. Be really, really careful with it. Great, some answers coming straight in. We've got Arian with B. We've got the Riddler with B, we've got Eva with B, we've got lots of people with B. Charlie's gone for E, which is an interesting choice in this question, Charlie. Gregor Strong's gone for a B, so lots of B's heading in here. Anything else? We've got B, 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 B. Very, very confident here that it's B. Can we take a look at the answer? Yeah, it is the level of disposable income. This is the key factor in influencing the level of spending in the economy. Now, we know that the other things affect it as well, but it's really useful to know which factor affects it most, because then you can compare different effects at different times, and you can evaluate by assessing the significance of these factors, and you can evaluate by looking at the scale of the impact that these will have. So really helpful to know how big the effect will be, not just whether there will be an effect. Fantastic. That's a great start. Let's get on to question 2. Okay, the level of saving in an economy has decreased and household borrowing has increased. The most likely effect of this is what? Is it that income tax rates have risen? Is it investment has risen? Is it that government spending has risen? Or is it that consumption has risen? What do you think is the answer here? Take a second to read the question again if you're not sure. We've got answers coming in straight away. We've got J with D. We've got Amira with D. We've got Hollow with D. Anyone else that's brave enough to think, actually, I don't think it's D, and we'll put a different answer? Or are we all totally confident that the answer for this one is D? Okay, I can't see anyone writing any other answer than D, so let's have a look. It is consumption increasing. Of course, gotta have faith with you guys. You know exactly what you are doing there. Good. Let's have a look at question 3. Okay. The difference between GDP and GNP, and I know that the difference is that one's got a D in and one's got an N in, okay? But what is the difference between them? How do we calculate the difference between those? Okay, let's see some answers coming in here. Jerry's gone for C. Jerry's gone for C here. Rax has gone for C. Janvi's gone for C. Tazine's gone for C. Reapers has gone for C. Lots of people agreeing here with each other. Sevid's gone for B. Well done for standing out from the crowd. Okay, let's take a look at the answer here. Okay, so what we've got to think is, what do these letters stand for? GDP stands for gross domestic product. Domestic means within, so it's within a country. GNP is gross national product. That's by nationals of that country. So the difference between these two is that gross domestic product is what's being made within the country. It doesn't matter who has made it, or it doesn't matter who the factors of production belong to. It has been made within the country. GNP has been made by nationals of the country. So we need to make adjustments for nationals or factors of production owned by nationals in different countries. And we do that by net property income from overseas. Wonderful. Okay, question 4. So this is our last multiple choice question. We're off to a really quick start here. Really get your brains going. A final increase of GDP of $6 billion following an increase in state spending of $4 billion. Let's go for pounds. Let's pretend they're all pounds. Means that the value of the multiplier is what? Okay, so let's go for £6 billion increase in GDP after we've had an increase in state spending of $4 billion. What do we think the answer is here? What do we think? Okay, Charlie Hancock's gone for C. Millie's gone for C. Eli Price has gone for C as well. Again, lots of you agreeing. This is fantastic. I think that we might be all on the right track here. Let's have a look at the right answer. That is, of course, correct. So we know that we have to multiply 4 by something to get 6, and that is 1.5. A lot of us are doing very, very well here. This is looking really, really good for your macro exam on Monday. I'm going to hand over to Lisa.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to have a look at potential trade-offs between macro targets. This is a really common area that you get the opportunity to evaluate in, and it's a very common area to discuss in essays in the macro. So the plan is you're going to have to do a matching here, and you're going to have to match the letter on the left with a number on the right. And John's going to kick us off with the clock, and we're going to give you a minute to try and match these pairs. So kick us off with the clock, please, John. Okay, that's great stuff. I've got lots and lots of answers coming in. I suppose the one that most of you have connected is inflation and rising unemployment. So, John, let's have a look at the correct pairings. That's brilliant. Okay, so there are some classics here for us, really. We know about keeping inflation low and stable is often combined with rising unemployment. Some of you may have looked at something called the Phillips curve, which shows that relationship. Of course, we're living in a very strange world at the moment, whereby we have incredibly high inflation running at 10.1%, and yet unemployment remains pretty low. So some of our conventional economics is being thrown out of the window a little bit at the moment, but our conventional trade-offs are low inflation, battling against rising unemployment. We can also see high economic growth, sometimes leading to rising inequality. You may have encountered this particularly when you look at LEDCs. As they get rich, you can end up with a burgeoning middle class getting rich, or perhaps a few getting rich who own resources, whereas the rest stay relatively poor. So that's certainly something that we might see when we're talking about LEDCs. Expansionary fiscal policy, we're normally talking about cutting taxes or raising government spending, which could shift your aggregate demand curve, and that could cause demand pull inflation. Cutting interest rates during a low inflation period would reduce the incentive to save in banks. We know savings very important for funneling through to investment. And finally, policies aimed at meeting environmental goals. That could mean taxes, green taxes. They often impact on international competitiveness, because if we put green taxes on our production techniques, they make our goods more expensive, make it harder for us to export abroad. So being green often comes at the price of being uncompetitive. So this is a really good area to look at, thinking about conflicts. You can write lots and lots of wonderful analysis and evaluation if you can deal with these sorts of conflicts. And of course, you can have not just one conflict. High economic growth could clearly conflict with rising inflation and rising inequality. So although we've matched them in pairs, plenty of others could come into this. You don't just have a conflict with one policy. So I'll pass you back now for our next exercise.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at some diagrams, and you might recognize this first diagram as a circular flow of income. However, depending on where you've learned this, you might have learned one that looks slightly different. And actually, there are lots and lots of ways that we can draw the circular flow of income diagram. What really matters is what's moving from where to where. So what I really recommend, if seeing this is putting you off a little bit, maybe it's not as you recognize it, I recommend going onto Google Images and having a look at all the different ways this diagram is drawn and getting your head around each of them. Not only will that make sure that you have lots of practice at working your way around a circular flow of income diagram, but it also might make you a bit more confident if one turns up on the paper that looks slightly different to what you might have learned. Okay, so that said, let's have a go at this. I want you to tell me what labels go at A, B, C, and D. Now, you don't need to give me them all at once. You can just give me A is this, D is this. Off you go. I want some answers. What are the labels that should go as A, B, C, and D? Look careful at which way the arrows are moving. Okay, so we've got some answers coming in already. Reapers has got some answers coming in. The Riddler's got some answers coming in. T's got an answer. Sophie's writing some answers down here. This is quite tricky in some ways because it's getting your head around something that might look different. What else have we got? We've got Hollow that's coming in with some answers. Charlie's coming in. Okie dokie. All right, let's take a look at what the answers are, and then we'll talk a little bit through what they are and perhaps some errors that might be coming up. So, A, we've got money that's moving from households to government. Why would households pay government? Well, that's taxes. And actually, we've done a pretty good job of that one. A lot of people have got that right. Well done. Question B. So B is money that's moving from the government to firms. Now, we've had lots of different sorts of answers here. Government purchases is probably the most appropriate one for this one. So it's money that's moving to firms. So government purchase, this might be if the government, I don't know, is building a hospital and they need to buy some beds, then they need to buy those beds from somewhere, for example. C is money that's moving from government to households, and these tend to be social transfers. You've given lots of different advantages, different examples of these. So some of you have said benefits or pensions, all of those things. Social transfers are where we're moving money from one place to another without goods and services going in return. Finally, we've got D, which is a movement of money from firms to government. Why are firms paying the government? And that's tax again. So we've got lots of different movements going on here. Now, the one that I just wanted to have a look at was someone said public goods. Now, we've got to be really careful when we use the word public goods, because in our head, it sounds like it should be publicly funded, but we know that public goods in economics has a very specific definition, goods that are non-rival and non-excludable. Instead, go for publicly funded goods. They're goods provided by the government or publicly provided goods. Just be really, really sure to make that distinction so that you're not losing easy marks in your exam. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. Okay, interesting diagram here. Take a look. And what label should go in that yellow box? What is that yellow box representing? So we've got a tariff diagram here. We can tell that by the fact it says tariff on the side. That's pretty helpful to us. Okay, Eva's come straight in. I said tax revenue. Matty's agreed with that. Any other ideas here? What does that yellow box represent? Jacob said government revenue through tax. Lots of people saying government revenue here. Wonderful. To fund me, Eniola. Lots of people saying that. And let's check the answer. Yeah, you are in fact right. Now, if you're not sure, the way to work this out is that after our tariff, we need to work out what are our imports. Well, our imports are now Q5 to Q4. And that's because our total amount that we're selling or that's being consumed by people in our country is Q4. But we're only making Q5 of those ourselves. Therefore, the difference must be imported. So that tells us that bottom, that horizontal edge, that's telling us the width of the box. Now we need to work out the height of the box. If the height of the box is the tariff, then if we do the tariff times the number of imports, that's going to give us our government revenue, our tax revenue to the government. Well done. Okay, one last diagram. Okay, similar sort of topic here. I think this is a tricky one. This is really pushing you here. Okay, first we've got to look for clues as to what diagram this is, and it's telling us it's a subsidy. We've got pre-subsidy and post-subsidy. It's telling us the free trade price. This is telling us that it's going to be a trade subsidy, which is slightly different in the way we might analyze this. Okay, AK has gone for producer surplus. So has Tenzin. So is Jake and Ash. Again, lots of you come in with exactly the same answer, but is it right? Let's have a look. It is. Sure. Oh, that was Siri. Siri's trying to talk to you then. So total subsidy payments made by the government. So if we have a look at this, we can see how much has been sold domestically, and then we can times that by the vertical distance between the two lines. That's the subsidy. So the vertical distance between the lines is always going to be the subsidy or the tax. Remember, that's always going to be a vertical distance because you're always looking at a difference in price, which is on our vertical axis. Fantastic. Really, really good job there. I'm really, really impressed. I'm going to pass you back to Lisa.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we've got a bit of jeopardy on our hands in that we're going to have a look at the macro spinner. And when the spinner stops, we're going to have to answer a question about one of these factors. So, what is it going to be? Let's see where that spinner's going to stop. Oh, okay. What would an impact of extreme poverty and deep inequality be? Now, there's a clue in this statement, because what sort of countries do you think we need to think about if we're looking at extreme poverty? What sort of countries do you think we might need to think about? Are we talking about Germany? Are we talking about the UK, or do you think we're talking about countries in other regions of the world? So I think first of all, I've got LEDCs. You're spot on. Excellent, Van and RK. We're really thinking about LEDCs when we use those phrases, extreme poverty. So what do we think? Give an example of extreme poverty. Tell me some of the impacts that there might be as a result of this. So what do we think the impacts might be as a result of extreme poverty and deep inequality? Let's see what we've got going on here. What do we think some of the effects might be of that? So we've got some here. Yeah, we're thinking about LEDCs. So we're really thinking about things like low life expectancy, fewer years of healthy life. You could throw some other things in there when we talk about extreme poverty. High infant mortality could be included in here. We've also got low post-16 school enrolment rates. That's almost likely to be the case. You've probably also got low primary school enrolment rates as well. So all of these things would be examples of impacts of extreme poverty in LEDCs. You could also talk about perhaps the rural and urban divide. Very often in LEDCs, you're going to see huge inequality of income, making it between the rural and the urban. If we take that to China, the actual inequality of income tends to happen between coastal areas and inland. It's the same sort of idea, but it's a sort of an application of the rural urban. So there's some good answers here coming in through the chat, talking about those that have got low economic growth having a higher marginal propensity to consume. So there are some fantastic answers coming in the chat. Very well done. John, can we have another spin, please? Okay. So we're on a similar theme here, but here we're looking at policies to promote equity in the UK. So it's very important that you apply this to the UK economy. What does the UK government do currently to improve equity or income equality? Or maybe you might be thinking more what it doesn't do. But I can see some excellent answers. Tyler said minimum wage increase. We've got mention of progressive tax. Someone suggested having a higher inheritance tax threshold to deal with wealth inequality. Fantastic mention of wealth. Remember the difference between wealth and income. Wealth is your assets, and income is what you earn. That's a very common error to muddle up wealth and income. Let's have a look at some of the answers we've got here on our list. And you've already mentioned some of them in your chat. Quite brilliant. Other things you might want to think about is perhaps the triple lock on pensions. As we know in the UK, pensions are protected. They go up either in line with inflation or wages, depending on what's the highest. You could also have better vocational qualifications, helping people invest in their human capital in order that they can get better paid jobs. But those things are very much UK centric. So it's very important that you make sure when your macro exam comes along, have a look back to the budget that happened in March. There are quite a lot of policies there that would fit into this idea. Worth remembering that the budget in March talked a lot about childcare. If you can subsidise childcare, it means you can get normally mothers, but not necessarily fathers as well, back into the workplace. That's a great example of a policy that can help with equity and the distribution of income. Brilliant answers, everyone. Even though I know you're focusing on micro, you are on fire on macro. So keep up the good work. And I'm going to pass you back now for your next section.
I'm agreeing with that. Definitely on fire today. Very, very good. Okay, so we're going to be looking at on balance. So I'm going to ask you for one advantage, and we're just going to start with the advantages here. I'd like you to give me an advantage of globalization for an emerging economy. Now, I saw a couple of people at the start say they're a little bit nervous about their exams, and this is a really, really good way to practice what happens when I see a question that I don't necessarily 100% know the answer to. Think through what you can do. Let's have a look at the words in the question that are going to help. So globalization, I'm thinking I'm going to have to define globalization in order to answer this. So I'm remembering that globalization isn't just trade, it's increasing interdependence. That might mean it might mean factors of production moving across boundaries. It might mean the increase in information. It might mean the increase in our reliance on each other. I'm also looking at that word emerging economy. That's a bit of a discriminator word, a bit of a weasel word. I've got to think, what is true about emerging economies? I know that they're growing very rapidly as they change from a less developed to a more developed country. And I know that they're probably going to be relying significantly on trade, and they're going to have quite rapid increases in trade as they become very, very integrated in global markets, and they're doing that very, very quickly typically. Okay, loads of great stuff going on here. Melanie's got more integration, more jobs, mobility of labor improved. We've got James, increased economic growth from FDI. Gosh, these are flying past me. Rax has got higher inequality. We're just going for the advantages for right now, unless you can justify that as an advantage. Bubbles Facts has gone for increasing interdependence, means that increased info transfers and communications. I really like that what Bubble Facts did there was to give a bit of a chain. I challenged them to go a little bit further. What are the benefits of increasing information transfer and communications? Extend that chain as much as possible. The best answers that are flashing up here are the ones that are really considering that this question is asking you about an emerging economy. Think about what they really need as an emerging economy, and think about how you can distinguish that from, say, a developing economy or a developed economy. It's just some fantastic things coming through here. Let's have a look at what we've got. Now, there are so many answers you could have put here. We went for it opens opportunities for developing nations to borrow money to help overcome the limits of a domestic savings gap. Okay, we know that in developing countries they can really struggle to build up enough income because there's not a big enough difference between their income and their spending enough to have savings, and that has lots of impact within the economy. Hopefully, this would help them to borrow to fill that gap so that they can then invest. It also allows for deeper division of labour and the resultant economies of scale. Again, we can really apply this to our emerging economies. What kind of markets are they going to be specialising in? Those markets are typically things like manufacturing, for example, which really benefits from economies of scale. So we can really add our context in there, getting us some extra application points as well as doing our analysis. Okay, hit me with some disadvantages. Arian's already on it. He's gone for, or she's gone for, firms may send profits back to other countries like their headquarters, and they won't spend it in the host country. And actually, therefore, there might not be that much FDI actually going on that's particularly useful for the firm. Matthew's gone for a high amount of women in the workforce might mean it becomes less skilled, particularly if those nations in the past maybe have had more unequal education regimes. Maybe that will change as they move through into a more equal economy. Becca said that economies are more connected and interdependent, which increases the risk of contagion. Great answer there. Okay, let's see what we've got as our disadvantages. So very, very similar to what we've had from a couple of people there. It makes the emerging economy more at risk from external economic shocks. Let's really apply that to emerging economies. First of all, they might not have the stability to be able to cope with that because they might not have the reserves. They might not be able to get the credit to deal with that. They also might be in industries that are already very vulnerable to shocks. For example, they might be in mining industries, for example. We also have the potential exploitation of domestic workers. We know that when businesses are set up in emerging economies for the purposes of trade, they tend to be very labour intensive. However, if labour is your key factor of production, then it might be that there's an incentive to try and decrease that cost as much as possible. And therefore, we've got potential exploitation of those domestic workers because firms will be looking for countries which have the lowest labour standards because that's a rational thing for them to do because then they won't have to pay as much. Some really, really, really great answers there. There are lots of things that I haven't picked up on there that I have seen as they've flashed back. Some really great answers here. There are no 100% correct answers for this one. Okie dokie.
Okay, it's back to me for the final exercise, and evaluation is the fairy dust on your answers. It's what you need to be able to do confidently in order to get those high level marks to access the top scores. So it's a really crucial exercise to practice, a skill to have. And you can see along the bottom, we've got a range of phrases that you could use to help you evaluate. We haven't included long run, short run, because I know you're all very familiar with that. So let's try and use something a little more unusual. I'm going to get the wheel to be spun by John, and we'll see which evaluative term we get come up. It's the word however. So you've got to come up with an evaluative phrase to follow on from the sentence. A cut in corporation tax can encourage an increase in planned investment by businesses. That would certainly be true. It would give them more retained profits that they could invest with. But, however, what would you say following that? Is there an alternative view you can give? Is there possibly a downside to firms investing in perhaps more technology, etc.? Is there any other downsides? Someone here has said, however, they might want to distribute their extra profits in dividends. That's a possibility. What else might be happening here if firms have the opportunity to spend more on investment? Let's have a look at one of the options we've given. Okay, we've said that if investment happens, it could lead to a loss of jobs through labour being replaced by machinery. And indeed, around the corner from my school at my local ITSU, in the last year or so, they've put in the sort of the touch screens, so you don't actually have to go to the counter and speak to a person to buy your sushi. And McDonald's have been doing this for a long while. So it is the case that technology can lead you to being able to replace workers. So when you think about investment, sounds like a good thing, but if you're losing your job, it probably isn't going to be. And you might also argue at the moment, and I'm going to see if anyone puts this in the chat, even if corporation tax rates are cut, what's the interest rate in the UK at the moment? Let's see if anyone can put that in the chat. What's the interest rate in the UK? Went up last week. Is anyone going to be on the money and get that? Hey, good stuff. Yeah, we're absolutely on it. We've gone up to 4.5%. So my reason for asking you about that is that even if you cut corporation tax rates, you could say, however, as interest rates are rising, firms would not be keen to invest. So we've got a couple of evaluative points there. So it's always useful to practice this skill. Okay, let's give it a whirl and have another go at another type of evaluation. So spin that wheel, John. Okay, we've got a depends on this time. So our statement is net inward migration of workers to the UK can allow for an increase in the supply of labour for those industries or markets where there is a shortage. So do we believe that that is actually true, or are there some possibilities whereby that might not be true? So is it true that having migration coming into the UK is going to plug the gaps in the labour market? Is that going to be true? Let's have a look at what we think. This is a very topical issue, as we all know, and we're suggesting that the workers that are coming into the UK would need to have the correct skills to fill the positions required. We know at the moment in the UK we've got a shortage of HGV drivers, shortage of people to pick fruit, and also we have got a shortage of people like engineers and high tech people. So you'd have to be very sure that your immigrants were coming in and they had the right skills. We do know that in the UK, we've hugely benefited from immigration because lots and lots of our skills gaps have been filled by migrant workers coming to live in the UK. Of course, Brexit has meant lots of them have returned. So, actually, we've got big labour shortages still, but now the government is less keen on having immigration in. So depends on is a really useful way of evaluating. Try and mix it up with your evaluation. Don't keep saying however or on the other hand. Try and get a range of phrases that you can use because that really is the fairy dust, as I say, on your answers. And now it's back to John.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Isabel. Wonderful stuff from both of you. Can't thank you enough. And obviously can't thank those who have been chatting away and giving us some responses in the chat window. Some brilliant answers tonight. Did you think, guys?
I thought so. Excellent.
Brilliant stuff. Wonderful. Okay, so just to remind you about a few things that are going on, we've got two revision blasts tomorrow night with Jeff, which are concentrating on micro. We're back on Thursday for the next in our little mini series of concentrating on macro topics. So plenty of revision blasts available for you over the next few days. The PowerPoint we've been using tonight will be available to download as soon as we've finished this live stream. So please feel free to do that to take a little bit longer over some of the questions. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up in YouTube if you found tonight useful. That helps get our message out there a little bit more. And all I can say to you all, from Lisa, from Isabel, from everybody at Tutor to You, the very best of luck with your exams in the next few days.
Good luck. Yep.
Good luck, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.